Hello, this is James Graff with Advisors Mortgage Group. With another mortgage minute, this is going to take more than a minute. We're going to discuss world news, just to keep people reminded that you can look at the you can look at rates, all interest rates around the globe. You can look at the 10-year Treasury note, which I believe is now at 0.63%, up from 55, I think was low. 56 might be the low. Extremely low. I think these are historic lows. I should look it up before I say that, but extremely low. We're looking at basically almost zero. We have the world's currency, the dollar, so that's what's keeping I believe that's what's keeping the interest rates higher than some countries that have gone negative. I know that Japan has a negative interest rate. You have to pay them. You have to keep the money under the mattress or pay the bank to take it and keep it and do what they want with it. Anyway, we're going to talk about the world because everything affects the 10-year Treasury note. And anyone that doesn't look at everything going on in the world is, I don't know, in my mind, absolutely insanely foolish, absurdly foolish. If you don't look at everything going on in the world, you will not see it coming. The pandemic was not local. You couldn't find the pandemic in the numbers of the mortgage rate bonds. Those numbers didn't include the pandemic coming at you from Japan. You had to know all about the science behind the different labs over in China and the different effects of wet markets and blah 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 blah. There's an awful lot of knowledge. The more you know about the entire world and everything and everyone in it, the more you will understand business rates, stock profits. You have to analyze everything because everything, absolutely everything, impinges upon it. Sorry, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about Beirut. This is probably the biggest global news at the moment. Devastating explosion. More than 135 people were killed and thousands more were wounded this week when a massive explosion at Beirut's port sent a red mushroom cloud over the city and caused a shockwave that blew out windows miles away and left a crater 50 feet wide. Boom. Boom. That may be one of the largest explosions since Hiroshima. I don't know. I don't know how to quantify that in history's terms. Some 300,000 people are now homeless. Almost 500,000 people homeless. Hospitals and morgues lacking electricity quickly filled up with the injured and dead as ambulances struggled to navigate streets full of rubble. Again, my heart goes out to all these people. I am very saddened and kind of upset by anyone suffering anywhere on the earth, whether it be my friends and family or be people halfway across the world. There are people suffering always, everywhere, and my heart goes out to them. Moving on. Bleeding heart liberal, is that what they call them? Sorry. Okay, moving on. My opinion only. At least one hospital, St. George's, was completely gutted by the explosion. President Trump speculated that the colossal blast was caused by a bomb, but Lebanese Prime Minister Hassan Diab, not sure how you pronounce that, said a fireworks warehouse caught fire and then ignited a nearby warehouse packed with 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate, a fertilizer that can be used and is used in explosives. I interjected is used. So, what are we looking at? We're looking at Wile E. Coyote. I don't want to inject levity into this horrific situation where 145 people died and how many were injured? Thousands of people wounded. It's an absolute horrific nightmare, but a little bit of levity. It's like a cartoon, isn't it, with the firehouse, the fireworks warehouse catching on fire. Was there a bomb involved? President Trump thinks so. Does anyone else think so? I don't know. I know that the head of the Lebanese government says no, definitely not. Sorry, no, didn't happen. Fireworks warehouse caught fire. Fires happen in warehouses. It's just honestly too hard to believe. I'm a skeptic when it comes to news and the spin on things. I will tell you, we don't know what happens. They report on what they think happens. They report on what they see. It's hard to know exactly what happened. So moving on. My last thought was ammonium nitrate. That's absolutely irresponsible and negligent to have that much ammonium nitrate in one spot ever. So whoever did that is to blame. Whoever allowed that to happen is for sure to blame. Moving on. That's my opinion. No one else's. The dangerous chemical, extremely dangerous, explosive chemical, had been stored at the port since 2014. Someone is to blame for that. That's just foolish. Despite safety warnings from port officials, who are probably dead now, right? I don't know, were they caught in the blast? Quote, this catastrophe will not pass without accountability, unquote. Diab, the Prime Minister of Lebanon, said. Quote, those responsible will pay the price. Buck stops here. Who's responsible for making sure that the ammonium nitrate was not piled up in the docks? Sorry, and that's my opinion. Moving on. Hezbollah, the Lebanese Shiite militia. I shouldn't even be talking about this at all. This is beyond my scope. I should not be talking about this. I do not wish anyone ill will ever. I will not. I will not make any statements after this. Hezbollah, the Lebanese Shiite militia, known to store weapons at the port, insisted it was not involved in the blast. Israel, which frequently strikes Hezbollah bases, also denied any involvement and offered humanitarian aid. I'm sure Hezbollah offered some aid too, but they don't mention that, do they? Again, bias. And, I don't know. I would like to know the truth there. Who offered aid and to what extent and what percentage? Details. Anyway, do you believe them? I have to believe them on the face of it. I have to believe them, right? Lebanon was already on the brink of economic collapse before this disaster, with 1 million of its 7 million people lacking enough money to buy food. 1 in 7. Before the country went into coronavirus lockdown, COVID-19 lockdown, earlier this year, hundreds of thousands of Lebanese were taking to the streets to protest the corruption and incompetence of the perennially divided sectarian government. It's true of everywhere. Is it not true of everywhere? But I'm sure it's more so true in Lebanon. I will not speak to that. Moving on. Talks with the International Monetary Fund, a topic for another video, over a bailout had stalled because competing government factions failed to reach agreement. Lebanon imports most of its food, which was news to me actually. I didn't know that. And the loss of the port will cripple trade. So they're already starving and they lost their port, which imports all their food. It's a humanitarian nightmare. They don't talk about that, but it's absolute humanitarian nightmare. It's ongoing. I'd like to find out more personally. It's up my alley. Beirut is the capital. I know that. I know where it sits exactly on the middle of the Mediterranean on the western coast. It's by Israel. It's by Jordan. It's by Saudi Arabia. It's above Egypt. Lebanon. I probably, as a American, should be commenting on any of this stuff. Israel, Lebanon, Hezbollah. Should be commenting, should be just reporting the facts as we receive them. So, moving on. Should we move on? Let's move on. We're getting worse. We're getting some more stuff. What else should we talk about? There's lots of news to talk about. But, yeah, a lot of stuff in here is leaning a little bit left, so I'm afraid to read it. But we'll read some of this anyway. Baghdad. This is kind of fun, but not fun for them. Hell temperatures. Heck temperatures. Iraq is baking under a blistering heat wave that sent the mercury soaring to a record 125 degrees Fahrenheit in Baghdad last week. Record temperatures in Baghdad, 125 degrees. The overstressed electric grid is failing in many areas, and while the rich have generators to run the refrigerators and air conditioning units, most Iraqis, not the rich, are just sweltering. This is mimicking other areas but this is intriguing to me. Quote, no quote. 2 protesters were shot dead. Sorry to hear that. By security forces last week during the demonstrations over a lack of electricity. I hate to say that we're going to see more and more of this, but I'll check my bias. Quote, the heat is unbearable, unquote, Baghdad resident Ahmed Hashim told the New York Times, a left-leaning paper, in many people's opinions. Leans, it's not really, anyway, sorry, pretty factual generally. The opinions definitely lean left. Okay, next. Quote, they try to balance. Quote, there's a psychological pressure. People can easily get into a fight, unquote. And there's no relief in sight. The forecast puts Baghdad temperatures above 107 degrees every day for the next 2 weeks. The heat is cooking the entire Middle East, breaking all-time highs in Iran, Lebanon, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. So we've got record highs. We've got a fireworks, was it a factory? Warehouse. Fireworks warehouse caught on fire. It's starting to make sense, right? Heat, extreme heat is a problem. And extreme heat in the Middle East is extremely extreme heat, right? Extremely extreme heat. Records. Breaking all-time highs in Iran, Lebanon, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. We could go into that some more, but I think we'll leave it at that and move on to the next. It's a little bit cartoonish as well. But does it impinge upon our 10-year Treasury note? In some incredibly small way, perhaps. And if these events lead to other larger events, definitely, right? If a war breaks out in the Middle East, we're watching these events unfold carefully, right? Watch everything carefully. That's my point. Watch everything carefully. Picolot Island, Micronesia. I'm not sure how you say that. Picolot. As seen in cartoons, three shipwrecked men were rescued from a tiny Pacific island this week after searchers saw the S.O.S. they had scrawled in the sand. This is just really comedy, frivolous nothing. Does this affect us? Not in any way. So you have to be able to distinguish between world events and, interesting, fun nonsense. A lot of this is interesting, fun nonsense. Too hot in Baghdad, people getting shot. Could become world news. It's world news in a way. World news that the historic temperatures. This is not world news. This is just fun. The men were sailing the 26 miles from Pulawat to Palap. Good names. 2 atolls in Micronesia when their 23-foot boat, not my choice, I would pick a bigger boat, veered off course and ran out of fuel. Wow, they got lucky being discovered. They landed on uninhabited islet, 120 miles away. Big ocean, lots of islands. A U.S. Air Force unit based in Guam responded to the Micronesia's call to help, in spite of the message on the beach after the sailors had been stranded for 3 days. They're sweating it. They're like, they're talking about like what if, one day they're like, oh well, one day you're sweating it hard. Third day you're like, can we survive on this island kind of stuff? Anyway, interesting. You got to put yourself in their minds. Always put yourself in other people's minds. Quote, we turned to avoid some rain showers. Mistake. Sorry, that's my editorializing. Said Pilot Lieutenant Colonel Jason Palmyra Yen. Quote, and that's when we saw S.O.S. and a boat right next to it on the beach, unquote. Okay, so they swerved from the storm and luckily came upon them. Otherwise, they might never have come upon them. So the storm was like some kind of godsend. Serendipity, beautiful occurrences, karma. The Americans radioed the Australian Navy, which had a ship nearby. Happy ending, cartoon little story, silly. But let's read some more because we were only at 14 minutes. We can go to 20 minutes or so, right? Hong Kong, election postponed, invoking a British colonial era law. Invoking a British colonial era law because Hong Kong was under British rule for quite some time. I believe it was a 100-year rule. and it ended in a certain year after the 100 years was up. I could be making that up. Look it up. Hong Kong executive Carrie Lam has postponed the city's September elections for a year. So she did what Trump is talking about. She postponed it for a year, saying a second wave of coronavirus infections will make voting too dangerous. Quote, "We want to ensure fairness in public safety and health," unquote, Lam said. Now, the opposition called the delay a power grab. And, it's funny, I was fine with this article up until that point. If you just end the article right there, I'm like, okay, it kind of sounds like it makes sense, right? I don't know, right? There's always more than two sides to a story. They say two sides. No, there's many, many, many sides to a donkey or an elephant. What are you looking at? Who's looking at it? How many blind men are looking at the elephant? How many opinions? Okay, let's move on. The opposition called the delay a power grab, noting that pro-democracy candidates had done well in local council elections last year and were expected to sweep the legislature. Before Lam's announcement, her pro-Beijing administration, I didn't know that, she's pro-Beijing administration, had barred dozens of pro-democracy campaigners from running for such infractions as failing to pledge loyalty to local and national governments. That's authoritarianism. That's China impinging its will upon Hong Kong, and it's a trend we're going to see continue until maybe the democratic world loses Hong Kong. Hong Kong's supposed to be a democracy, and China agreed to that. For how long? Who knows? Obviously we see it failing, and echoed in our president's wish to keep people safe in order to postpone the election, which to many is undemocratic, according to these people. Moving on. Quote, "This is the most scandalous election ever in Hong Kong history," unquote, said activist Joshua Wong, who was among those disqualified. So they disqualify them from running for office for infractions such as failing to pledge loyalty to local and national governments. If you don't pledge loyalty to your local and national governments, you can't run for election. You could run for election in America, you just will not win. No one's going to vote for somebody who doesn't pledge allegiance to the flag and to the federal government and to local state governments. I'm not sure how that works exactly. I don't think you have to pledge allegiance. We pledge allegiance to America, not the government. Right? Is that how it works? I think so. Makes you think, right? More to think about. Sorry. This has been James Graff with way too many opinions, way too many thoughts. And that was just, that was like 1/5 of the articles I wanted to read to you. Just to show you that you have to know more than the other person. That's the rule, basically. Try to know more than the other person in order to better determine what is best for yourself and those around you, your family, friends. Rates are impinged on by all things all over the globe. The 10-year Treasury is affected. The U.S. 10-year Treasury, which is basically in dollars, right, is affected by everything that goes on in the globe. That's my contention. Some things affect it much, much, much more than others, but you're always better off seeing it before it comes. Watch the pitcher. Watch the pitcher all day. Can't just watch the pitch. Watch the pitcher all day. How does he pitch? Anyway, this has been James Graff with Advisors Mortgage Group with another 19 minutes of mortgage talk. I want to thank you for listening thus far and hope you have an absolutely wonderful day. Thanks for listening. Bye.